What's up, everybody? It's your boy George Carmi from Full Press Coverage. We're talking Terry McLaurin today. Let's get it on. What's up, y'all? I appreciate y'all spending your time with me today. And today we're going to talk about Terry McLaurin. The hot topic in DC is Terry McLaurin was not here during our mandatory training camp over the last week. Do I think it's a big issue? No, I do not. I think it's actually a very smart strategy by his agent, considering that training camp, the official training camp doesn't start to 7th. Having him come back for these 3 days wouldn't be the most wise move because basically he'd come back, potentially get injured, it could potentially lose millions of dollars, right? If Terry McLaurin skips these 3 days of training camp, he has 6 more weeks to get his body right, 6 more weeks to negotiate with the team. And I think it's just as a smart segue, a smart play to get the hype up in the media and getting the fans to basically say, why aren't we signing Terry McLaurin? Where is he? To kind of use that against the team. So, guys, today we're going to talk about Terry McLaurin. We're going to talk about where he stands in the wide receiver pantheon and whether what is he worth and whether Washington should sign him or potentially trade him. So, let's get into it. We're talking about Terry McLaurin. Let's talk about basically the case for Terry McLaurin and why we should pay him. So, guys, we're going to do to start off everything. We're going to look at the top 10 wide receivers in the league and where they're paid. So, let's kind of start off with some context, right? Terry McLaurin is getting paid $4 million over his $4 million over his 4-year career. So going into the end of his rookie contract. So he's looking to get paid. He's not necessarily the youngest guy in the world. He's 26 years old, turning 27 next year, within this year, excuse me. And basically this is his big money contract that people should be looking for. I just wanted to kind of set the tone and kind of show you where the wide receivers rank across the board because the wide receiver landscape has changed over the past couple of years. We're starting to see $30 million wide receivers on average for Tyrek Hill and Devante Adams, 28 millions, and DeAndre Hopkins, 27.2. We're starting to see those large contracts. And honestly, there's a valid conversation for whether wide receivers should even be being paid that much or should teams invest in rookies and kind of save this money because wide receivers are coming in more prepared every single year. Whether these rookie contracts can save you money big picture wise. But look at these players. We got to find out where Terry McLaurin would slot because truly that's how it works in regard to the whole negotiations and agents, right? Where does Terry McLaurin compare and where should he slot in with these top 10 wide receivers? Guys, looking at the top 5, I'm kind of surprised AJ Brown kind of slid in there. I'm not the highest AJ Brown guy in the world, but we know that Tyrek Hill, Devante Adams, DeAndre Hopkins, Cooper Kupp, they've been producing over the past couple of years. Tyrek Hill, for instance, what's he have? He's about 6 years in the league. He has 56 touchdowns, 1,200 yards, 9 touchdowns last year, 1,300 yards, 15 touchdowns. He's the premier deep threat in the NFL over the past couple of years. I do think he's going to take a step back with Patrick Mahomes not being with him and being with Tua Tagovailoa in Miami. I do think he'll take a step back, but I think he is justified to kind of have that large contract. We see Devante Adams, a two-time All-Pro, had 18 touchdowns in 2020. We all know who he is, arguably the best wide receiver in the league, best all-around wide receiver. But going to the Raiders, taking that large contract, we're going to see where he basically goes. Cooper Kupp, one of my favorite wide receivers in the league. He had a triple crown last year in regard to receiving touchdowns, receiving yards, and receptions. He is justified. He signed a new contract at 26.7. And then we see where, in my opinion, where Terry McLaurin should be being slotted and should be being comped to. We see AJ Brown at 25 million. We see Stefan Diggs at 24 million, and then we see a drop off to 20 million for DJ Moore. So realistically, where does Terry McLaurin fall in that little nook right there, right? Is he better than Keenan Allen? Is he better than Amari Cooper? I would argue that Keenan Allen is a really productive wide receiver, but considering, it's his track is a little bit older. Terry McLaurin, I think he should be slotted above him. The crux of this video, what we're going to look at is where Stefan Diggs compares, where DJ Moore compares, and where does AJ Brown compare, and whether Terry McLaurin should be being paid as much as these guys. So we're actually going to look at that in a second. So let's take a look. Let's start off with this, right? Terry McLaurin, I'm going to kind of skip a slide for a second. If you go over here, Terry McLaurin, big picture. If you look at his stats, right, these are the top 20 wide receivers in regard to receiving yards. Cooper Cup led the league with 1,947 yards, 16 touchdowns, 145 receptions. It's a beastly, awesome year, right? He deserves to get what he can get, right? Justin Jefferson is basically the new hot topic, the new up and coming wide receiver in the league. When people talk about drafting a wide receiver and changing the game, they often refer to Justin Jefferson as that guy. If you look on the left hand side, I have the top 10, and I have 11 through 20 in regard to receiving yards, right? And slotted in at number 20 in regard to receiving yards is our guy, Terry McLaurin, with 1,053 and 5 touchdowns. What I would argue about Terry McLaurin, what hurts his whole game in regard to his negotiations, is the amount of touchdowns that he has. If you look at the true elite of the elite, you're seeing that 16, that 10, that 11, that 13 of that top five. Terry McLaurin is kind of sliding in with five on that bottom portion, and that's not great company to be in with Darnell Mooney and Miteman and T. Higgins and so on and so forth. So Terry McLaurin, hopefully next year will produce more. I think he will with Carson Wentz, who's more of a big arm quarterback, but he is kind of, subject to all this carousel that we've had a quarterback for the Washington Commanders. So he has been limited. So as his agent, his talking point, his arguing point should be Terry McLaurin is producing with a subpar quarterback, and hopefully he can ascend and do better with a potentially better quarterback, right? But the big picture with Terry is that he is actually better. He more valuable to Washington than basically any other team because he does provide that like leadership aspect to him. He does have that leadership qualities. And if we are trying to build a culture, I do think that Ron Rivera needs to reward him and pay him. I'm actually going to play a clip right now for you guys where Terry McLaurin was on the NFL Network and talked about leadership. This was in October of last season. It's about, I think it's after week 3, week 4. He's already putting up some stats. He's already putting up some numbers. And they were asked, the NFL Network asked him, how does it feel to be a captain? How does it feel to be a leader in Washington? And guys, I love his answer. So let's take a look at that right now. I'm going to put the video up. Sit back.
Terry, you talked about being a leader, and I mentioned the fact that you're a captain here in your third season with Washington. Outside of quarterbacks, to see a captain outside of that quarterback position at a relatively, young experience level in the league is something pretty rare. How do you describe the way you try to lead your teammates and how they kind of rally around you?
Yeah, I've been fortunate to be a two-time captain now, and that's probably one of the biggest accolades I take most pride in because that speaks to the type of character, the type of person you are outside of just the player that you are. You're selected by your teammates and your peers, and they see the type of person you are on a day in, day out basis, not just on Sundays. They see the way you prepare, they see the way you carry yourself, the way you try to lead and produce on Sundays and throughout the week. And to be selected for my second time in a row, especially in my young career, that means a lot. That probably means more than any of the touchdowns or the stats I got going right now because that speaks to more than just football. And so, I've always kind of been a leader by example, but over the more I've grown and got more comfortable, I've kind of just take more of a vocal leadership role and not more so just trying to dictate or tell people what to do, but just make sure, the standard that Coach Rivera is preaching to us day in, day out as a leader on the field. I'm just making sure that everybody's trying to uphold that standard and making sure we're on the same page. So I'm learning, I'm developing, and the good thing about it is we have a lot of good other leaders in our locker room that I'm learning and depending on as well.
Upholding leadership, upholding what Ron Rivera wants to get across. We have other leaders that we kind of pull upon, ask upon, right? Basically, Terry McLaurin is everything you ask for in regard to a leader and everything you ask for in regard to culture. I think Ron Rivera knows that. I think the front office knows that as well. And essentially, that's what makes this whole negotiation pretty tricky, right? And that's what makes it what's even more tricky is that he is the face of the franchise. If you actually go to commanders.com, you look at that top banner where it says take command, you kind of see him as part of like the premier people that they focus on. Jonathan Allen, the number 2 overall pick, Chase Young. Obviously, our quarterback's going to get some attention as well. Sign with us, season ticket holders. Terry McLaurin is the face of the franchise there. In case and whether or not we should sign Washington Commanders should sign Terry McLaurin, and I think it's a no-brainer. I think you basically have to do so. So, what is the number that you should be looking for? So we talked about the stats, right? Terry McLaurin is in that top 20 wide receiver class. There is an upward potential with him with having a more stable quarterback with Carson Wentz in the mix. But what I want to do right now is break down the numbers to kind of show you where he stands, right? So if you go back a couple here, and if we look at basically where AJ Brown ranks, right? AJ Brown's the 5th highest wide receiver in the league, signed a contract on draft night with the Philadelphia Eagles, being traded by the Titans, 25 million per year, right? We see Stefan Diggs at 24 million and DJ Moore for 20 million. These are going to be our 3 case studies that we're going to talk about in this podcast right here. So first up, right, the $25 million man is A.J. Brown. How does Terry McLaurin stand up to A.J. Brown on a per-game basis and overall for his career? What I find pretty interesting with A.J. Brown is it's an apples-to-apples comparison, right? If you look, both guys basically played from 2019 to 2021. Terry McLaurin has the edge with 46 games played. And then we have AJ Brown playing 43. And the stats are actually pretty similar, right? We have 2,995 yards for AJ Brown and 3,090 for Terry McLaurin, right? Terry McLaurin also has a lot more receptions than AJ Brown, right? So more games, more receptions makes sense, about the same amount of yards. The difference is the amount of touchdowns. AJ Brown has 24 touchdowns over 43 games, and Terry McLaurin has 16. So, Terry McLaurin has 3 games more with 8 touchdowns less, which isn't a compelling case to be being paid as much as AJ Brown. However, if you break it down, with injuries, quarterback positions, the gameplay, the offenses, the offensive coordinator, there's a myriad of factors that come into play in regard to how they should be being paid. But if you break it down on a per game basis down here, their stats are pretty damn similar, right? So per game, AJ Brown is 4.3 receptions per game. Terry McLaurin, 4.8. So Terry gets the edge. In regard to yards, you're splitting hairs. 69.7 for AJ Brown, 7.2 for Terry McLaurin, right? So they're about the same. Slight edge to AJ Brown. Touchdown, 0.6 for AJ Brown, 0.6 touchdowns per game for AJ Brown, 0.3 for Terry McLaurin. So again, slight edge to AJ Brown. I would say they're pretty comparable in numbers. So if I was Terry McLaurin's agent, I'd be asking for something around 25 million because it's about the same amount of numbers over there. Let's look at our next case study. DJ Moore. Okay. Remember on our stats before, DJ Moore is making about $20 million per year, right? DJ Moore has been in the league 1 year longer. He came in 2018, while Terry McLaurin came in 2019. There are 63 games played for DJ Moore, and Terry McLaurin's played 46. Comparing the numbers, basically because there's so many more games, 17 more games played for DJ Moore, he has 4,313 yards. So he basically has 1,300 more yards than Terry McLaurin. Remember, I said 17 more games played for DJ Moore, so essentially 1 more season, right? So Terry McLaurin has a season less with about 1,300 yards less than DJ Moore. So in theory, if he played 17 games, he had 1 more season, he could potentially have the same amount of yards as DJ Moore. What I do like in Terry's case here is he actually has more touchdowns and less games. So Terry McLaurin has been producing. And going back to our per game basis, we see the stats. Receptions are identical. Yards are slight edge to DJ Moore. Terry McLaurin has 1 point higher in regard to touchdowns per game. So realistically, it's a pretty good comp. So my rationale, we've been hearing it in local circles, is the debate is, do you think Terry McLaurin should be being paid like DJ Moore at 20 mil or AJ Brown at 25? And I'll get to my thoughts later on down the road over, as we go through our podcast. But so far, I tipped the cap to AJ Brown. I think AJ Brown was probably had a little bit slightly better stats for our first case study. I think Terry McLaurin wins here. And then our last one's going to be Stefan Diggs. So Stefan Diggs signed a he signed a contract where he's averaging $24 million per year in April. And honestly, he's outperforming his contract. I think like his agent's kind of kicking himself now, looking at what AJ Brown got, because this guy just produces, man. He's putting up numbers. Granted, he's been in the league longer than everybody. He started in 2015, so he's been playing for 6 years. But he basically has 48 touchdowns over that time period, 7,383 yards. So he's like on pace for like a pretty iconic career if he kind of keeps this up. Like that's legit. He could break the 100 touchdown mark if he can double his career and kind of play for 12 seasons in regard to that, right? So he's doing a really good job. Um, you know, we see it compared to Terry McLaurin. Stefan Diggs is one of the best wide receivers in the league. Terry McLaurin isn't on that level yet, especially not right now. So let's look at it at a per game basis, right? Um, looking over here, Stefan Diggs has 5.8 receptions per game. Terry McLaurin 4.8. One more catch per game for Stefan Diggs. He averages 4 more receiving yards per game, so it's pretty comparable actually. And you look, the big differentiator is that 0.5. Every single time there's a 50% chance that when Stefan Diggs steps onto the field, he's going to score a touchdown. That's how much he's producing over there. So he is more of a monster in regard to putting up points. And, obviously Josh Allen's a major factor as well there. Also, if I was Stefan Diggs' agent, I'll look at the playoff totals. I kind of pulled the stats up as well. Stefan Diggs has had 10 games in the playoffs, putting up 687 yards for 4 touchdowns. That's ridiculous. Like he is a producer in the playoffs. He's a producer in the regular season. He's the man, right? So him getting paid less than AJ Brown is kind of a slap in the face, in my opinion. But we are seeing that like this is Terry McLaurin's realm, right? If you could argue, you would argue that he should be getting paid more than DJ Moore, slightly less than AJ Brown. Stefan Diggs is kind of getting ripped off a little bit. Stefan Diggs should be getting paid more, probably higher than Cooper Kupp, to be honest with you, but that's kind of where the cards fell. As you saw before, Stefan Diggs, 28 years old, has experienced 8 years. He signed a 4-year, $96 million contract with the Bills. Has an average of $24 million per year. So kind of wanted to show you where he's at and how it breaks down. He had an extension, I believe. So he started off with a small cap hit of 11 million. And it's going to balloon to $26 million per year in 2024. That shouldn't be a large deal when it's all said and done, because we're seeing with the Amazon package, with the TV packages, that things are blowing up and the salary cap is going to balloon, and that $26 million is not going to be a big deal long term. Going to Terry McLaurin, he wants to cash out, guys. He's 26 years old. He's going to be turned by the time the season starts, he'll be 27. Like, this is his major contract. If he doesn't, if he plays 5 more years, plays at 32 and retires, this is the long contract that he's looking for. So he wants to cash in. So far, if you look, he only he's on his rookie contract, 4 years, $3.8 million, all that he's earned so far. So I'm fully in support of Terry McLaurin and basically how much he should be getting paid. So this skipping mini camp is not a big deal to me. I think he should be arguing for more. I think he should be arguing for around the AJ Brown price and kind of setting that tone over there. If you go to SpotTrack, all these stats I'm showing you is from SpotTrack, by the way. So SpotTrack.com, they're basically saying that his comps are AJ Brown, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Mike Williams, as we talked about before. They're saying his true average annual salary should be $21 million. I can see where they're coming from. They're projecting a market value of 4 years, $84 million. I think he's going to top that. I think Washington is going to set the message and set the tone, and they're going to overpay Terry McLaurin for him to stay in DC. The one thing that Washington should not do is disrespect Terry McLaurin by offering something too low and trying to negotiate their way up. That has burned them in the past with Brennan Sheriff and Kirk Cousins and so on and so forth. They really just got to reward their guys and slightly overpay for Terry McLaurin, because frankly, he's earned it as a hard worker, and I think it's going to set the tone for the entire team. Let me show you this real quick. This is actually pretty cool. This is a breakdown of statistical, just next level stats for wide receivers and where they stand. So if you look, we have the comps that we've been talking about with AJ Brown, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Mike Wood, and Terry McLaurin, right? We're looking at games played percentage, receiving targets, receptions, receiving yards, touchdowns, yard after catch, drop passes, and rating. So while you look at the screen, if you kind of look, you see every player's particular stats and kind of breakdown, and basically where Terry McLaurin compares, and how on the very bottom part the percent change. So if it's positive, it's Terry McLaurin is exceeding his comps, right? He's doing better than the people that are listed, the four people that he's compared to. If it's a negative, he's a little bit below them, right? So looking over here, in regard to AJ Brown, Moore, Allen, and Mike Williams, he has played in 96.9, he's played in 97% of his games, 4% more than his peers. He averages about, roughly 2% more targets per game. He averages 8.2 targets per game, which proves that he is a heavy feature in Washington's offense. He's essential. Washington, they're going to have to, if he doesn't come back or if they trade him, it's just going to kind of totally reshape the way Washington runs itself. With those 8 receptions targets per game, excuse me, he catches it 5 times, okay, which is 1.5% higher than everybody else. However, his receiving yards are slightly below 3.6% compared to his peers, lower than his peers. He averages 67 yards per game. That's only better than Mike Williams, AJ Brown, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen are above him. Obviously, that just shows that he's a short passing. He's been limited in the deep passing game. He's been limited for big explosive plays. If you're a Commanders fan, you kind of know that's the case anyway. Receiving touchdowns, it's also killing him as well. Compared to his peers, he's about 33% less in regard to receiving touchdowns per game. AJ Brown's been putting up numbers. He's better than DJ Moore. Keenan Allen produces as well, so we are seeing that issue there. But he rarely drops the ball. He only drops the ball on 16% of all of his throws, which is exceptional. And his rating is taking a hit because of the touchdowns. So to kind of recap everything, right? This is my take on Terry McLaurin. I think he's performing on par with AJ Brown and DJ Moore. I think he's slightly better than DJ Moore, slightly below AJ Brown, but very, very close to AJ Brown. And realistically, I think Terry McLaurin is a better all-around wide receiver than AJ Brown. Like AJ Brown kind of wins with that bully ball aspect, but Terry McLaurin is more of a refined runner, a tougher wide receiver, but they are on that same level. So in regard to that 25 billion for AJ Brown, that 20 million for DJ Moore, that is kind of the sweet spot. So where Terry McLaurin should fall. I think he should be like, if I was Terry McLaurin's agent, I'd be pushing for more of the AJ Brown aspects. I do think he is kind of approaching that, especially with this Commander's context. Stefan Diggs, man, $24 million. He should be getting paid more. So, if that's going to be the Commander's counter argument, we're paying Stefan Diggs $24 million. Do you think Terry McLaurin is better than him? And realistically, the agents kind of have to eat it. Be like, no, Stefan Diggs is putting up those numbers like that. Age will play a factor. He's 27, so realistically, he's old for a person coming off his rookie contract. This may be his last contract altogether. And I think realistically, guys, no one really wants to say this, but Washington is at the deficit here. They need Terry McLaurin more than Terry McLaurin needs Washington. Because if Terry McLaurin becomes a free agent next year, he hits the market and there's going to be a bidding war for his services, right? Why would you stay in Washington when there's so much controversy and there's uncertainty at the offensive coordinator position and the quarterback position? Are they really developed? Are they really that top tier? He could potentially go to like any team. I mean, almost hypothetically, the Chiefs or the Broncos or maybe the Packers or something like that. He can go to any of those teams and just totally revitalize his career and explode. Granted, Washington does have that ace up their sleeve where they can tag him, which I believe would be $20 million per year or something along those lines, or $22 million per year. It actually would be financially smarter to do that. But at the same time, that just creates bad blood and bad chemistry. And then you're playing that double tag game that we saw with Brendan Sheriff and Kirk Cousins. I don't think it's that prudent. This is a timeline. So realistically, guys, I do think Terry McLaurin is going to sign a contract. The first day of training camp is going to be July 27th. I'd expect a deal to be done in mid to late July. I don't think it's going to be anytime soon. I could be wrong. I'm hearing things kind of are pretty good right now. There's conversations are starting to warm up a little bit. But some big benchmarks is July 27th is the first day of training camp. August 13th is the first preseason game. For context, John Allen signed his deal on July 26th, one day prior to training camp. And I kind of see that happening with Terry McLaurin. I think Terry McLaurin is going to sign his contract the day before training camp, maybe about a week before. So think about mid to late July. I think he's going to eclipse and surpass AJ Brown. I think Washington is going to have to give in. It's going to be 25.2 or 25.5 or something. I think it's like maybe $25.5 million to slightly go above AJ Brown, just to show good faith. Like, hey, you put in the effort, you put in the work, you deserve it. And I think it's fully justified, right? Like, if you're going to be strictly looking at data, real Tyrek McLaurin is probably like a $22 million wide receiver, right? AJ Brown's 25, DJ Moore's 20, probably right in the middle. Split the difference, 22.5 will be Tyrek McLaurin's true market value. But I do think Washington should overpay to keep him here and make him feel loved and basically build up good camaraderie amongst the team, like reward people for doing the right thing. Realistically, a $2 million difference isn't going to break anyone's back. You can always hide and manipulate the salary cap. I don't see it as a problem. I think you should definitely do it. And I think it will happen. I see maybe Terry McLaurin maybe getting like a, 4 years, like $105 million contract or something along those lines to basically surpass AJ Brown and prove that, Terry McLaurin is the premier wide receiver in the NFC East. I do think it's going to happen. I'm not worried about Terry McLaurin. I do think that he's going to be ready. I think like he'll come in for training camp. He'll be professional. I think he does know that the playbook inside and out, and I don't see it as a problem big picture. So realistically, I do think Terry McLaurin will sign with Washington. I do think he'll be our long-term wide receiver. He'll be the face of the franchise. Washington needs him, and I think it's going to happen. So that's my prediction. I'm sticking to it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you guys for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment on YouTube. See you guys soon. Peace, guys.